it goes. All right, now, show me the way I got the way I am, the good, the bad, and then the ugly. Okay, now, a lot of times what I'll do is, especially if I'm just starting with a student, a lot of times I'll say, what do you think are some of the biggest hurts that just people in general have today that are in your age group? And so we'll just have them click off what those are. What do you think some of the things they'd say are? Hurts. What are the biggest hurts today? Huh? Divorce. What else? Huh? Moves. Communication with the parents or whoever. Abuse, they might say. And rejection, and and they might say, if I was guessing, they'd say, well, friends are just stupid, or people are just stupid. They treat you really poorly. Now, and again, all I'm trying to do is I'm going to ask them for some very personal information here in a minute. So what I'm going to say, well, how have you observed other people do this? How do they get by? Everybody's got to survive on that. Do you have any friends that were divorced? Oh, yeah. Well, what have you noticed they've done? Now, here's the interesting thing. They'll observe, and maybe in some pretty judgmental ways, how some of their friends have handled these things. And they'll be very candid when they won't look at themselves. Duh. It sounds a lot like you. Okay, so the goal here... Oh, did I say that out loud? But the goal here is to sort of ease into this whole hurt thing. Okay, now... They'd probably say something. Well, I've seen some of my friends. Man, they just clam up. I know. If they watched my son went from being a prep to he totally went the opposite way, and he made sure that he never bought his clothes anywhere but at Goodwill, and the rattier the better. I mean, honestly, he looked on the outside just from reflection. He made sure he looked on the outside what he was feeling on the inside. I'm not mad at him about that. I'm just telling you that's what changed for him. Because Josh was the classic thinker. He liked order in his life. He hated that things would look, disheveled or whatever. I mean, he was just off the scale. And he went exactly opposite of that. All right? And so if they were talking about Josh, I'd say, well, he did a complete flip. Now, they wouldn't make a judgment about that person, but they would observe, here's the reaction I saw in them. They might say, well, listen, I know my friend Buck, all of a sudden, man, that guy used to never drink at all. I mean, he is the party animal right now when that happened, and so on. And just right on down the line, what do you think they might say about how they've observed people react when they move? Just guess. What do you think students would say when they've seen people move? How would they say they've observed people handle that, survive that? Huh? Withdraw? Of course, some of it they wouldn't be able to observe because they didn't know them beforehand. How about abuse at home? Run? Pretend it's not there?
Or get angry.
Get really angry? Excuse me. How do you think they would say they handled the whole friend thing when the friends rejected them? Friends gave them a hard time. Fake it? Become something they weren't? You'll get some really candid conversations. You'll be surprised how much conversation you get out of this if you just sit and wait for them to respond. In our culture, in the particular culture I live in our city, you'd hear a lot of hurts related to sports. Because that's huge. I mean, in the school system we're in, either you're in sports or you're in the music end of things, the arts end of things, and if you're not in one of those, you are nobody. And the competition is absolutely bizarre. It's crazy. Parents spend anywhere from right around $1,500 to $2,000 a year just to have their students involved in sports. Just that, and that's not counting the equipment they buy for them and that kind of thing like that. So it's incredibly competitive. And it's incredibly political in our area. So I'll hear a lot that's connected with that in terms of hurts. I hear a lot about divorce. I hear a lot about silent abuse that happens at home, that kind of stuff like that. And I'll also hear a lot about, from the girls, I hear a lot about how they've been used by men, by guys. Okay, but again, get them dialoguing about that, and the nice tool about it is it just gets it out there in the open that they're not the only one on the planet that's probably ever had a hurt, and that they've got buds that are dealing with the same stuff that's coming down their way. That's the only goal we're trying to reach for, because you're going to ask for some very personal piece of information here. Okay? Now, then we're going to ask them what their five biggest hurts are. If I were telling you mine, you heard mine before. I got beat up. And again, you need to make sure that when I got beat up, I had Jody left me. I had to deal with my dad when he went to deal with that suicide thing. Excuse me. I had to deal with my coach. And excuse me. I don't know if I told what I said the last. Well, obviously in my adult life it would have been divorce, but that's not going to be. If a student has it, it's going to be because their parents got it. All right. And then the ways I dealt with this when I got beat up, I became the funny guy. Excuse me. And it's really interesting. My buddies were into wrestling. So to get them to quit beating up on me, I convinced them that the announcer for the wrestling match, you couldn't beat him up because he couldn't talk if you did. So I became the announcer for when they beat up other people. It's quite a plan. Okay, with Jody, it's really interesting. I got really depressed, and I completely withdrew. With my dad, I started performing and started actually preaching at youth rallies when I was 14 years old. And by the time I was 18, I was doing them everywhere, and because that's the thing that got his, in my mind, that's what would get his approval. And when the whole thing with my coach happened, that day I started working out, and by the time I got into high school, I was boxing junior golden gloves, and I was quite the buff guy. So I was going to make sure that nobody ever didn't see me again. And of course, when I went through the divorce, there's a whole range of things. But you get the idea. So what you want to do is go through. Yeah, you'd never guess I was buff at that time, would you? Now. Oh, buff. Okay, buff is 28-inch waist, 46-inch chest, 18.5-inch cannons on your arms. Mr. Universe. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Buff. Okay, so yeah, you can see it now. Yeah, it's just under here somewhere. If I can put. Okay. Yeah. And so here's what you want to do. And of course, also eating would have been one of mine when I'd get beat up. My mom did the whole comfort food thing. And so again, you just want to track through, and all you want to say, if you want to use the word cope, I've had a lot of success saying, students, how'd you get through that? How'd you survive? Everybody's got to survive. How'd you get through that? Now, obviously, as they're communicating these things to them, the kinds of things you guys were doing last night with the empathy and recognizing how much hurt's there, that you want to pull all that out. This is the time to do it. You want to be real genuine. And here's something really important. If something blows you away that for you would have devastated you, you need to say so. You really need to say so, because they survived, you might not have, and you need to say so. Now again, one of the things I like to do is take them through, because students have this incredible ability to live a dual life. Now adults do too, but they can have all this hurt going on, but then they go off with their success suit and kind of keep everything, all the facade just right. And man, you can step out of that just right. I can remember when I would go to the gym, and all the guys were impressed with how I looked. I didn't have a care in the world. Therefore, I spent a lot of time at the gym, because when I went there, I was the man, and I didn't have to think about anything that was out there. So what I like to do is say, now let me ask you, listen, that's been a rough life. I can see where that would be a rough thing. You're just like a lot of your other buds. There's a lot of hurt out there, isn't there? Are you so happy with your life that having all that happen never gets you down, yes or no? Now, all I'm trying to do is to get them to get them out of this facade that everything's not perfect, that they might need a help somewhere along the way? Is your life so perfect that it never gets you down? Of course, I'm hoping they'll mark no. Or that you've never wondered if it could be better. That you didn't have to feel all those things. You didn't have to be impacted as much as you are. That the way you survive works perfectly for you and you don't need any help at all. Have you ever felt that before? Well, yeah, I've felt like that before. All we're trying to do is to get them to acknowledge that this is not good news. And I'm hurting. All right? All right, let's make any questions about that. So the good, the bad, the ugly. And finally, the rut. The last way that the reason the way you got the way you are, why you do what you do is this. There's this big rut people get in. Now just for a side note, in Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2, you're familiar with the passage. And it's not on here. You're familiar with the passage. It says this: therefore, brothers, present yourselves as a living sacrifice, and so on and so forth. He says, therefore, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world. Well, the word for pattern there in the South, if we translated that in Southern Bible, it would mean the wagon rut in the road. You know, in the olden days when they had wagons and you go on a dirt road and it would be raining and it would cut a rut in the road, and you can't get out of it with the wagon, you just have to go with what's there. That's really a good translation for this idea, that there's a wagon rut that people get into, and it's almost impossible to break out of. And so I'll tell a student that, or any other example that you'd like to communicate to them, and say, here's the deal. I don't care who you are, adults, your parents, whoever else it is. People get in a rut of doing things, and if it's just a little boring, it's one thing, but man, I tell you what, if you end up getting destroyed over it, it's bad news. So what we want to do is look at that rut. Now to do that, I need to ask you a few questions. So let me ask you a few questions. What desired impression do you think most teens want to leave at a party? Now why am I doing that? Again, I'm trying to take it from general down to specific. So what impressions? And we're not going to go through that right now. You know how to do that. So I would just brainstorm with them. What do you think some of your buds would like for people to think about them? But then what impression would you like to leave? Now, excuse me, you can jot those off. I'm going to do mine right now. If you were talking to me and I was a student, this is what I would have told you. What impression you want to leave? Well, I want them to say I'm good looking. As a matter of fact, not just good looking. I want them to say that I'm buff and that I have great hair. Because I did have great hair. See, I'm just vain, man. I'm surprised the Lord doesn't ask me to shave my head because of my vanity on this thing. All right, this is what I'm going to say. I want them to say that I am the best. For me, I'm the best Christian teen going, man. Ain't nobody does what I do. Not only that, I'm a really good son because I really love my mom, and she's really cool, and I like that my dad. If I were telling you this, that my dad really thinks that I'm the best going. That all my friends, and this is really interesting, that my friends would know that I'm a Christian, but I am really cool. In other words, I'm not a stick in the mud. I'm not that I've somehow walked this perfect balance, that I am the man whether or not you're a believer or not. You get that? See why that would be important to me, given my history? All right, excuse me. I want people to say about me that you can really trust me, that I'm there for them. Excuse me, and this, of course, this is from the perspective of a kid that grew up in church, that there's lots of people that are going to be won to Christ because of me, that I'm going to go far in life. As a matter of fact, if I want to be the president, if I decide I want to do that, I'll be the president. That nothing can stop me. That I'm really funny. And oh, by the way, did I mention that I'm buff? And those are the kinds of things I would have named at that time. Okay? Excuse me. Oh, and here was another one, that I'm smarter than most Bible college students. Because there was a Bible college near, and I consider most of them dud heads because my dad taught me most of what people get in Bible college. He like. So when I graduated from high school, I had that. So I was really proud of the fact that I could outdo most of the Bible college students. Now, you get that? Now, if I had a kid that didn't grow up in church, it'd be a totally different pattern, right? Except that there would still be some things they want people to perceive them a certain way and so on. So you just fill those in right here. Say, okay, well, thanks. I really appreciate that. But then I want you to fill in, and well, I bled over. But what do you like at your worst moment? And again, so these up here are going to go in here. These right here are going to go right here. I'm going to go ahead and put the worst right here since I filled up all my spots. Everybody see that? We're going with that? So here I am at my worst. So I would just take what they gave me here and fill it in here. Here's what I am at my worst. I'm fat. And it's interesting. I would have answered that at that time even though there was an ounce of fat on me anywhere. I'm fat. I'm stupid. I'm hard to get along with. I'm a bad Christian, and I'll tell you what that was connected to. That as a son, I've just basically caused trouble. I'm going to be a failure in life. No woman will want me. Somehow I just get completely out of control. And if I was talking, I'm going to say this out loud to you. I don't mean any disrespect to you ladies at all, so please. But if I was talking to a guy and I had gotten comfortable with him, I would have said, listen, I really struggle with the whole sex thing. Not because I was doing it, because, see, I really prided myself that I wasn't doing the deed. But in my mind, I was way out of control. Just completely, totally out of control. Excuse me. And so I would, if I was comfortable with a guy, I'd have told him that. Excuse me. And the other thing is, I honestly think there's something wrong with me, because there are people. There's a lot of people don't like me. And as far as I can tell, I do everything right. I really did believe it. I do everything right, but there must be something wrong with me that I can't even see. I mean, I've got some serious something wrong with me. Now, if you gave that to me as a student, that's what my worst would look like. Question 2. It's really important at this point that you sort of stop and say, look, I'm not saying that you're like this all the time. What I'm saying is, it's kind of like when you go to the doctor and you sit on the end of the bench and he hits your knee and you just get a reaction. Here's what I found about me. If you really want to know what's on the inside of me, you just squeeze me a little bit. You put me in a situation that's really uncomfortable, that's stressful, and I'll say stuff that I'd never say normally. And I'd act ways that I'd never act normally. And if you can come up with an example of something you've done recently, and here's why I'm saying recently, if you can come up with an example of when you got squeezed recently and some nasty stuff came out, whether it was words or actions, all of a sudden you just leveled the playing field again. You see what I'm saying? Because they're going, wait, this is like a regular, if I was Australian, I'd say, this is a regular bloke. Okay? You see what I'm saying? And what it does is it just lets them know, okay, he's real, I'm real, we're all real, we get squeezed in, here it goes. Or a Sheila. Is that right? They're a regular Sheila, except I hope they don't say I'm a regular Sheila. Okay. That's good. He said he wouldn't say regular and he wouldn't say bloke like a palmy either. All right, so we get that done and say, now, let me just tell you, and we're going to go until we're at the break point, we'll finish this up. So this is what we'd say. Any questions so far? I'm going through this part kind of slow on purpose. Everybody all right so far? So this is what I say. Let me explain to you how this impacts your life. Let's just imagine that I'm a crazy man. Well, most kids would say, yeah, well, that's not too hard to imagine. Let me imagine I'm a crazy man and it's Christmas and we're all going to the mall and there's a bunch of people there and I pull out a machine gun, and you know the story. I pull out a machine gun and I'm going to tell you, you got to strip naked right there in front of God and everybody. And they go, and different people react different ways. I don't know you. You might come after me and try to attack me because you don't want to be naked. Some people would strip naked and go into the store and steal some clothes. Some would hide from bush to bush. Some would pass out. And, of course, you know the punchline. Some people just look for an opportunity to get naked. Well, and so we share that with them and say, listen, here's the point. When people get undressed, everybody reacts. Well, I'm not going to ask you to get naked in here in front of me. I'd be in trouble. But let me show you how that there are events in your life, because I believe that this circle right here represents a little suit you put on every morning when you get in, and here's why. Remember how we talked about how you're kind of hungry for love and acceptance? Well, this makes you pretty lovable and acceptable if you're like this. As a matter of fact, you know what? This is how I know you. If we've been talking, this is how I know you. But you know what? This guy gets rejected. And this person's very unlovable. So you know what? It makes a lot of sense to me. If I were you and I got up in the morning and I looked like this, I'd want to put this on myself. But what I'm telling you is there are events that happen sometime that sort of expose you or undress you. And it doesn't really, because nobody else really knows what's going on. But inside your head, this stuff right here gets stripped off and people see you as this right here. And that makes you feel very unloved. And let me show you how that happens. Does that make sense? Okay. Now the reason, you're going to note that I have all these circles together, and this is not exactly the way it is in your book. What this does is keep them focused on the whole span of things without using 2 or 3 diagrams. That's why we've pared this down. And so, I tell you what, why don't you tell me about the last time you got mad? Just the last time you got mad. Now, if you think a student is really struggling, in other words, the transition from this to do this, you're going to tell them the story about the whole idea of getting naked and getting exposed, and then you're going to say, now tell me about the last time you got mad. If you think you've got, side note, if you think you've got a student that's still kind of, I don't know if I want to do this with this guy. I mean, he just told me he was going to undress me. I'm not sure I'm real cool. Or if you just sense that they're a little undone, then this is what I'd suggest you do. You do what I'm going to tell you right now for yourself first, and then do theirs, because it puts you both on the same map. And as a matter of fact, if I've really, even back when we were doing these two things, if I got a student that I think's really struggling, I may pull out another napkin and do my what I want about myself and what I feel about myself at my worst. So that, again, they all know we're on a level playing field. But if you think they're tracking with you and everything's going fine, then you just go ahead and do theirs. So tell me about the last thing you got mad. Well, here's one. As a student, excuse me, that would have impacted me. All right? The last time I got mad, if you ask me, well, I can tell you exactly the last time I got mad. Same thing I get mad about every single day, every day for the last 2 years. I went in the other day and my dad said this, are you ever going to get your hair cut? Okay, so that's the last time you got mad? Oh, okay. Well, tell me, when your dad said that to you, what were you thinking? Well, I can tell you what I was thinking. Who the heck does he think he is telling me what to do? Oh no, here comes the lecture again about how, and this was the lecture, about how that I needed to understand that I was a representative of Jesus, and that if I was a representative of Jesus, I needed to be the best that I could. And the Corinthians letter and blah, 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 blah. Would that be a typical way a student would say that to you? Well, of course it would. Say, well, listen, yeah, I'm glad I'm not your dad. You know, just whatever to lighten up a little bit. Well, let me ask you something. May I suggest something? I like to suggest to you that there's a guy named Satan. And when you had that experience, there's a little filter that he put things through. Now, you don't know it. He doesn't knock on the door and say, oh, by the way, I'm here. But when you experience that, he kind of starts swirling around in your head. And I'd like to suggest to you, when that happened, here's what came down. When your dad came in and said that stuff to you, and you know what? It doesn't matter if the dad intended to be good, mean and ornery and obnoxious, or he was just, trying to be kind or trying to be insightful. It doesn't even matter. When that event happened, I wonder, is there anything in this list that you felt? Well, this is what I would have told you. I'd have felt like I was going out of control. And although I didn't agree intellectually, I'd have felt like I was a bad Christian, because that's what the message he was sending me. And when that happened, I got really angry. So can you see where this event happened, and I ended up feeling like a bad Christian, and I was sort of feeling like I was going out of control, and I got angry. And this is what I would say to the student. Well, so what'd you do when your dad said that? Well, I did two things. The first thing is I rolled my eyes. Well, why'd you do that? Oh, he hates it. And then I started debating him. And what I told him was that he needed to just get off my back, that I can name him 10 other kids in the church that were clean cut, and this guy was sleeping around, and I just start pointing out all the faults of all the other people around me. See, I'm a good Christian kid, man. I'm on the dime. And so I pointed to the faults of others, and I'd compare myself to them. And then I'd start yelling to counteract his yelling, because about this time he was starting to escalate. Okay, can you see all that? Now, excuse me, and then he'd go off in a fit, and my mom would appear through the door crying. That's what happened at that event. All right, does that make sense? Now, again, if I was telling them about myself, I would be doing this, but as I'm taking the student, I'm going to take all this. So this event happened, you felt like a bad Christian, you got angry, and then this is what you did to survive. Well, you know, sometimes we call that's how you coped. Well, let me ask you, important point, how did you feel a few minutes after that? Well, this is what I told you. I felt really bad. Oh, really? You felt bad? Yeah. What'd you feel bad about? Well, I knew that I'd really hurt my mother. Sounds like being a bad son. What do you think? So you see what happens is, an event happens, it reminds you you're this and not this. You get angry, and you do something to get out of that situation, and after you do it, you feel bad, and it just proves what you feel about yourself at your worst. Everybody with me so far? Now, then I want to go back and ask this question. I wonder why you do these things right here. Are we out of tape? Okay. Excuse me. I wonder why you do those things right there. Well, let's go back just a little bit. Remember I told you an event happens and it undresses you to reveal that you're this and not this, and you get angry? Well, when you get angry, it causes a lot of pressure. Have you ever noticed that pressure? Oh, yeah, I have. Well, when you have pressure, there's two elements to it. There's pain and the lack of pleasure. So when an event happens that reminds you you're this and not this, and you get angry, you're going to find something that's going to get rid of the pain or get you some pleasure, or you might use the bonus plan, and it gets rid of both, plus makes you feel some love and acceptance. Now let's just run through that a little bit. Let's see if what you did qualifies to fix that. So this is what I would do. I'd just go back with them and say, okay, the event was your dad came in and told you to cut your hair. You felt like you were being a bad Christian, like somebody's going to control you, so you're out of control. You get angry. Let's see if you got rid of any of the pain. What was the end result of this? Or your dad finally walked off. Well, so he's not yelling anymore, and he's off you about the issue about your hair. So you got rid of the pain. Well, was there any pleasurable to you? Oh yeah, I love it when I get his goat. You follow what I'm saying? That's what I would have told you. So qualifies in two. So anything I do to cope or survive is going to try to get rid of the pain or get some pleasure. But the minute I do it, or a few minutes afterwards, if I have anything in me at all that recognizes what's right or wrong, that thing's going to prove that I'm really the worthless, hopeless nobody that I feel about myself at my worst. Now, this is what I would ask the student. If they connected all those dots for me, and this was the student, I'd say, well, listen, when you're feeling your worst about making your mom cry and upset her and all that, because that's obviously pretty important to you, how do you feel? Well, I just feel really stupid. I should have known better than that. What do you do then? Oh, I get depressed. Well, I know depression is an internal temper tantrum. That's what I'm going to tell them. So you just get angry again. And what do you do then? Oh, that's simple. I go work out. Now, they're not going to note that to be some kind of survival note. But I just say, what do you do? I go work out. Well, let's see if that qualifies as a way to survive. When you work out, how do you feel? Oh, I feel great. Because the guys at the gym always tell me how incredible I look, and I got ripped abs, and they really love the horseshoe in the back of my muscle and the whole thing. And so we get really pumped. So it gets rid of the pain, and I get some pleasure. Oh, that's really working well for you. Now, if we went through this whole scenario again and again, as many of them as you can go through, you want to track with this student. Well, okay, so you went and worked out at the gym. How long does that work for? If that works good for you for a while and you feel better, well, it works fine. But then, excuse me, I go home and I see my mom's sad face again, and I know she's really worried about what's going to happen with me and my dad. So the very thing I did now just proves, oh, I must really be bad because Mom's really sad and she can't get over it. That's just how I would have tracked on this. Now, just real quickly, I want to point out to you that this is a guy that's got grade A idols. Because if you'd asked me when I was arguing with my dad, was I disrespectful? Although I knew in my heart I wasn't, I was very cunning with the way I disagreed with him. And if I raised my voice, I only raised it when he raised his. And so in my mind, I was completely justified in everything I was doing. Can you see that? So this is a church kid with grade A idols. You tell me, and I want some input here, what if I had a kid that was in grade F idols? Dad yells at me, Mom yells at me, I feel like I'm a worthless son, I feel like I'm a no-hoper, they tell me I'm stupid and I'm just a gold bricker, and I get angry. What's the grade F kid going to do with his idols? He might do drugs, he might go find a girlfriend and sleep with her. Well, let's see if sex works. Oh, sex is a good plan, because when I'm having sex, I feel no pain, I have incredible pleasure, and I feel love and acceptance, so it's the bonus plan. Now, this is really important. When you're dealing with a grade F or D idol, you need to make sure they understand that it's no different than the grade A idols. You need to make sure that they understand that you're not any more undone with the fact that they would debate their dad in a very sophisticated way than that they'd go have sex with somebody. It may repulse you more, but I don't really care. The point is you want them to get that this is all reactions based on getting rid of the pain and getting some pleasure. And then if, excuse me, and you need to keep moving this spiral, and this is what you want to say to them then. After you've done this, can you see that you're in a rut? Can you see that events happen that remind you of this and not this? You get angry and you find some way to cope or survive, and it just proves what you feel about yourself at your worst. Now, let me tell you something that's incredibly for students. Don't assume they're making these connections. Do not assume it. You make them say it, not make them, but you lead them to say it with you. You help them identify what part. And if you didn't get something down, if they didn't name something, you can say, oh man, I tell you what, if that was me, you remember Don was talking about this last, if that was me, I might really feel like I was just completely an idiot. Or you know what? I might feel like that I had become my dad. You know, whatever it is, that it's obvious to you that they're telling you, but it's important that they see themselves in this spiral. So you say, all you want to say is, look, you know what it looks like to me? You're in a rut. You're just like I've been in a rut before. Is that enjoyable? Do you like being, this is what I love, do you like being controlled by other people? Because it looks like to me you're controlled by everybody that happens to wander into your little event circle here. Now, let me stop for just a second and ask if you ask questions. Okay, one more thing, then we're done. The question I want to know, though, is what's the problem? And this is really heavy emphasis you need to make. If I went and talked to your mom and dad, they'd say the fact that you're doing drugs and drinking is a problem. Now, it may be a problem, but it's not the problem. Or they might say that the fact that you debate with your dad, if I was talking about me, or the fact that you get depressed. And of course, another one of my idols would have been eating. I wouldn't have been doing sex, but I'd have been fantasizing about it. You know, if you really, see, and here's the point. If you got a church kid, they're going to give you all their grade A idols. You need to keep tracking that thing, because I guarantee you, unless they haven't broken yet, they've got some grade Fs. They just aren't telling them. And you want to make sure that you get there if you can at all. But here's what you want to say. You know what? These are not the problem. Repeat, these are not the problem. And I'm going to show you why. Because, and again, we've done this before. If I were to get rid of all these things, I gave you a pill, and an event happened that reminds you were this and not this, and you got angry, you still got to find some way to get rid of the pain in your life. You are hurting, aren't you? And see, here's another thing. With students, a lot of times if it gets too intense, they're just going to back off and say, there's no problem at all. I mean, they do it with their parents all the time. They do it with other people all the time. No, I haven't got any problem. No, I'm not upset about anything. Oh, you're not? Oh, well, I guess what we've been doing is no big deal. We just been blowing smoke here. So, but if an event happened that reminds you this and not this, then you still got to find some way to get rid of the pain. So that's not the problem. Well, even if you find some more socially acceptable ways, you're still being controlled by people. Do you like being controlled by people? This is a huge issue with students. Students don't like anybody controlling their life. So I just hammer that and hammer that and hammer that. Well, let's say something else. What if we got rid of the stress in your life? What if we just took your dad out of the picture? I think I can take that. I know a few people. Or what if we took that stupid teacher, or this or that, or what if we took all the stress out of your life? Well, when something happened that reminded you of anything that's bad that's happening in the past, you might want to come up with an example like that. What if you saw that guy that stole your girl? You know, you're not got any more stressors happening that your dad's gone, but that guy that just stole the girl that you were madly in love with comes walking through the door right now. What's going to happen? Oh, he's dead. You see what I'm saying? You can't get rid of the stress in your life, so that doesn't work. What if you just moved away from here? I usually tell them a story at that particular point about a kid that I worked with that was the first patient out of a new detox center in Fort Smith, Arkansas. He was in there for 6 months. His name was in the paper. His dad picked him up on the day he got out and moved him to Colorado, 5 states away, because his dad determined that the real problem with the kid was that he had bad company. Well, he did have bad company, but that wasn't the problem. Guess who the problem was? Dad. And in 3 days, the kid was dead. Now, he had been totally detoxed, but his dad moved him 5 states away. He got 5 states away in an exclusive neighborhood with guarded community, and in 3 days, the kid found drugs and OD'd. So you see, even moving away or running away from a situation doesn't fix it. Why is that important to tell a student? Yeah, because that's one of the choices that you use. So you see, getting rid of the stress in your life doesn't do it, because wherever you go, that's where you are. Another story I'll tell them about Roxy. She used to, thank you. Well, I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. But the point is stress, getting rid of stress in your life is not the solution, because you can't get rid of stress in your life, and geographical solutions don't work either. So what's the problem? Well, what if I could fix this? What if an event happened and you really didn't feel like a loser? If you really didn't feel like that, if you didn't feel like a loser, if you didn't feel like things on this, you wouldn't get angry and you wouldn't have to cope. And even if every once in a while one got past you and you did something bad, when you started feeling bad about what you did, but you knew in your heart of hearts and you really didn't feel that anymore, all of a sudden this rut is gone. It's broken. I don't have to be controlled by anybody anymore. And they go, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. And when we come back after the break, I'm going to give you a couple of illustrations that you can fill in with this, and I'll tell you how to transition to the next thing. All right?